You're listening to episode 100 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm sharing with you the 10 lessons that I've learned from the past 10 years of content creation. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, a registered dietitian, nutrition business coach, and online entrepreneur with over 10 years of experience in online business. And I'm here to show you everything I've learned about creating a life and a business that nourishes you. On this podcast, we'll talk about the lifestyle habits, practical strategies, mindset shifts, and leaps of faith required to build a healthy body, a powerful mind, a strong spirit, and a successful business. Hello, and welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, and the reason why I sound so excited right now is because we are celebrating episode 100 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. I honestly can't even believe that we're here already at episode 100. We have been running this podcast for almost 2 years now. We're going to be coming up on our 2-year anniversary very soon. And I was trying to think what I wanted to share with you all for episode 100, because I really want this to be a celebration of the amount of content and the amount of stuff that I have brought to you and the guests that I brought to you over the past 2 years and just everything that we have created together over the last 100 episodes. And so what I thought about was what has allowed me to get to this point of having 100 episodes on the Fed and Fearless podcast, and then really thinking about what has allowed me to be consistent with content creation over the past 10 years. Because if you're not familiar with me, I have been in the online space for literally 10 years now. I started my blog when I was in grad school in August of 2011, and I have been blogging and creating content ever since, both for my business and for one of my mentors, Chris Kresser, who a lot of you are familiar with. I spent a lot of time, many years, helping him create content for his business as well. So I've pretty much been on this content creation journey for 10 years now. And it's really nuts to think about that I really haven't actually taken a break from content creation since 2011. And that's really when I got started with this. So it's pretty much been, since I got started, just consistent content creation. And that's a pretty big deal. As many of you know, if you are an online business owner, or if you're just somebody who is creating something in general, you know that doing something consistently for 10 years is not easy. And so I wanted to give you guys a little peek into the things that I've learned over the last 10 years creating content on a consistent basis, because there is so much stuff that has changed for me since I got started in 2011. And even the landscape of online business and marketing has changed as well. So there's so many new things that exist nowadays that were not in existence back when I got started online. And so I just want to share with you what I've learned in the last decade of content creation, not only with my own business and my own blog and podcast and everything, but also working with hundreds of other nutrition professionals, helping them grow their business as well. So I want to share with you my top 10 lessons that I thought of as I was thinking through what has helped keep me consistent in the last 10 years. And actually, that takes us right to my lesson number 1, and that is that consistency is the name of the game. Even though the format has changed in my own content creation, I've been consistently creating either blog, podcast, or social media content pretty much nonstop since 2011. And I really do believe that a big reason why my business is so successful is because I've been around a long time, and people know that me and my business are not just a flash in the pan. And it really doesn't matter what platform that you commit to, but the commitment to that consistency piece is so important. If you want to have a successful online business, you have to commit to some form of content creation if you want people to find you and find out about the business that you're running and the way that you can help them. For me, at least lately, podcasting has been the easiest way for me to get content out on a regular basis. And in addition to podcasting, my team and I have been working on getting our company's social media content more consistent. If you follow me, particularly on Instagram, you may have seen that we've started to post a lot more frequently than I was earlier in the year. And a big part of that is because I actually have team members helping me. Before this year, I was doing a lot of it myself, and not 100% of it myself, but a lot of it. And that was one of the reasons why it was hard for me to be consistent with both the podcast and social media. But now that I have my team helping and I'm able to provide them content to inspire what they're working on and to help me create content, it's something that we can be a lot more consistent with. But even if we don't take social media into consideration, this podcast has been running for almost 2 years. I've had a blog that has been running for close to 10 years. We haven't really been putting up new posts very often just because, again, we're trying to make sure that we're not spreading ourselves too thin. And I say ourselves because, yes, I do have a team helping me put out content, whether that's my podcast editing team or my assistants that are helping with creating stuff for Instagram. There are people that help me get this content out there. But like I said, pretty much since 2011, it's been pretty consistent with me creating content in some way, shape, or form. And for years, it was primarily by writing a blog every week. And some of you may even remember my first podcast with my friend Kelsey Kinney called Ask the RDs, which started in 2013 and then eventually morphed into the Ancestral RDs podcast, which I know a lot of you used to listen to that one. And that one we did over 200 episodes for. So that was a huge chunk of my content creation between 2013 and when I think we ended that podcast maybe around like 2017 or I think it was 2018, possibly. Honestly, I actually can't remember at this point because it feels like it was a million years ago. But that was something I was doing for years, both creating blog content and doing that podcast. And during that time, I was also creating content for Chris Kresser's programs, including the Adapt Practitioner and Health Coach training programs, which some of you may have gone through. And I was doing that from 2012 to 2019. So it's just kind of crazy to think about the fact that there really hasn't been a time in the past 10 years that I wasn't creating content on a regular basis. And I really think that that's been a huge part of what's allowed my business to be consistently successful over that period of time, because I do think there's a lot of businesses that come and go because they're not consistent with their content. Now, like I said, if you are super busy and you can't be doing all the content creation yourself, you can definitely hire help with this if you need to for your business in order to allow you to put your energy towards the things that matter. But in reality, if you have a nutrition business, especially one that's online, you're probably going to be creating content consistently, whether that be for your free stuff, for your marketing, or within your paid programs. Now, even if I'm not creating everything that goes out on our public platform myself, I'm constantly creating training materials for my paid programs, which actually helps drive a lot of the free content we put out there. I spend a ton of time creating trainings that a lot of them are multi-hour workshops or, I have a 12-week online program that has a ton of content in it that I teach my clients. And so my team and I will pull from the content I've already created and figure out a way to slim it down to a bite-sized version to share on social media. So it doesn't really matter if I'm creating free content, paid content, I am just creating content all the time. And that consistency is something that I think has been really, really valuable for my business over the last really 8 years of running a business, but 10 years of being online. And I truly believe that the most successful businesses are the ones who are consistently sharing valuable content with their ideal clients. And so if you're somebody who wants to start, grow, or scale your own business, then getting consistent with some kind of content creation is going to be a really important part of that process. Now, I can already imagine that some of you feel like, okay, I want to get started with content creation, but I'm nervous. I don't really know what to say. I'm uncomfortable, especially the idea of doing something like a podcast can feel really scary. And that brings me to tip number 2, which is that it doesn't get easier to create content. You just get better. Now, even though I've been creating content for my business as well as other people's businesses since 2011, I still get nervous sometimes. And I still sometimes have to ask myself, what am I going to talk about when I'm gearing up to produce some kind of content, whether that's a podcast or social media or a blog? There's a lot of times where I feel a little tapped out. Now, part of that could be because I've been doing it for 10 years. It's like, what else is there to say? But another part of that is just the nature of content creation, that there's always going to be the possibility of feeling nervous. And I used to be a lot more nervous when I first got started. I used to get so sweaty when I was recording a podcast with Kelsey for the Ancestral RDs. And even when we were doing Ask the RD, the first couple of episodes of that, I was terrified. I was so nervous. And I still get podcast sweats sometimes. That's literally what I call them, because I will start sweating when I'm recording a podcast. And a lot of times that happens when I'm interviewing someone that I really admire and I'm nervous to talk to, or even when I'm doing solo episodes, sometimes I get a little sweaty just because I'm excited and I'm a little bit amped up. So just know that it's not like you're going to get to this place where you don't feel nervous whatsoever about content creation, or you don't struggle to think about what could you possibly talk about. Now, the other thing that I've experienced is a little bit of a struggle with my voice. And maybe some of you can relate with that as well, because if you wanted to get on video or podcast, but you're like, oh, I don't really like how my voice sounds. Trust me when I say that I totally know what you mean. And it's been something that I've really had to work through, because for a long time, I lacked confidence about how I sounded on both video and audio. Part of that was because I actually got criticized by people for my voice when I was doing earlier versions of my podcast. So again, Ask the RD and the Ancestral RDs. We used to get comments emailed to us or submitted through the podcast, reviewing through like iTunes and that kind of thing, complaining about our voices. And I don't remember if Kelsey's voice was commented on, but I remember mine was for sure. And I feel like Kelsey's was as well. And I do think that that experience kind of took a dent in my confidence when it came to how I sounded with audio. And the only reason why I've been able to, well, I think I've gotten better. I do think my voice has improved from practice, but also just being able to get that confidence back really does come from practice and showing up and doing it consistently. Unfortunately, there's really no shortcut on this one. If you're feeling nervous about creating content, the only way you're really going to get over it is by doing it. It's by practicing and learning what can make things better at the same time, and really practicing those skills. And just understanding that you're almost guaranteed to be nervous and awkward when you first start. And even if you've been doing it for 10 years, like I've been, sometimes I feel nervous and awkward as well. So don't let that stop you from getting started. Don't let that stop you from sharing what you have to share, getting yourself out there, talking to your audience, sharing what you can help them with, because everybody starts from zero on this. And most people who have popular blogs and podcasts today had to get past those beginner stages of feeling super nervous and awkward and not really doing a great job. I know I've gone back and listened to old podcasts from the people that I really love to listen to, and it's just amazing how different it is, how different they sound, and how much better they sound now after doing hundreds of episodes and really getting that practice out there. So it's your commitment to practicing consistency that's going to make the biggest impact on your ability to get better at sharing your message, whether that's in writing, audio, or video format. Now, there are ways that you can actually train yourself to get better faster. There's places that you can learn how to write or learn how to speak more effectively. I've actually just signed up to work with a voice coach who I was introduced to by my mentor, James Wedmore. So if all goes well, then my podcast should hopefully improve in the future. But that is something that sometimes you do have to hire help to get better at the thing that you want to get good at. And again, even with writing is a skill that you can be taught. And for example, I have a coach named Anna Powers who actually teaches people how to write effectively for business. So these are things that are skills that both take practice and sometimes take some formal education for you to get to a place where you feel confident that you know that you are doing the best job possible and that people who are listening or reading your content are truly getting the value that you want to share. Because I really do believe that you have a ton of value to bring to the world, especially if you are a nutritionist. We have so much that we can help people with, and learning how to share that with the public and with your clients and whatever audience you want to share that with is very, very important. Now, tip number 3 is kind of related to what we were just talking about, and that is that you will get haters if you're doing it right. I have gotten haters for so many different things over the past 10 years of content creation that it's almost comical. In the beginning, when I first got started, it was those people who hated on paleo and ancestral health principles. Now, like I said, this was back in 2011 when this stuff was just getting popular and there was a lot of pushback about it. Now, some of it was fair, some of it I think was valuable, but there were some people out there that were just mean and wanting to shoot down anything related to paleo. And so I definitely attracted a lot of that when I first got started. Then eventually I started to get hate because I started sharing that I believed that low carb paleo didn't work for everybody, especially for premenopausal women that are menstruating and really in their fertile years. And that was something that for sure was a popular message and got me a lot of notoriety and helped grow my business. But at the same rate, it brought me a lot of haters that were super angry that I was, quote unquote, bashing low carb, which honestly I wasn't. I was just pointing out the possibility that not everybody does well. And here's maybe why you don't do well. And here's how to tell if you're not doing well. So that was something that I'm glad I shared it because I think it helped a lot of people. And it was definitely my own experience with my own problems with low carb and that affecting my hormones. But it is something that definitely brought haters out of the woodwork when I started sharing it more publicly. Then fast forward a couple years and I started getting a lot more hate, a lot of hate, when I started incorporating my Christian faith into my content and making that a more prominent part of my message. I remember when I started sharing that more publicly in my newsletter, in email, and on my blog and podcast, that kind of thing. It just was amazing how many people told me that they used to respect me and that because I was sharing my faith that they thought I was no longer respectable because they couldn't believe I would believe something like that. And that was something that at the time, was definitely a little nerve-wracking because I didn't want to just totally alienate my entire audience. But honestly, it was something that brought a lot of really amazing people into my world and a lot of awesome clients that really appreciated my viewpoint on that. But it was something that definitely drummed up a lot of, people telling me that they no longer respected me anymore and saying unfollow and all that stuff, which at this point, I really don't care if people choose to unfollow me or if they don't like me or, if they think I'm dumb or whatever. I know that that's going to happen, but that was something that just really kept building over the course of years. And that sharing of my faith was really, I would say, the peak that I experienced from any sort of audience or anything like that. Nowadays, I do tend to get less hate. And I think a big part of that is because I've backed away from sharing so much controversial stuff, honestly. I used to be a lot more just outspoken about certain things that were more controversial in a lot of different ways. And over the past year and a half, I just started to realize that the landscape of online business has changed. And it was just something that I no longer really felt called to do so publicly. Now that may change in the future. It's just the last couple of years I felt like I didn't really want to deal with all of the over the top anger and bashing of other people and canceling and all this stuff that's been happening over the last year and a half. I just really didn't feel like dealing with it. And this is a conversation that I've had with a lot of business owners where it felt like no matter what you did over the last year and a half, that somebody was going to be angry. Like it literally didn't matter what you were saying, what you weren't saying, if you just kept focusing on your business or if you were, doing some of the more outspoken activism kind of stuff. It honestly did not matter. Somebody was going to be angry. Like I know, for example, this is kind of ridiculous, but I remember last January 2021, I had an email scheduled for, gosh, I think, was it January 6th, which with the whole Capitol riot thing that happened? I had pre-scheduled that email like probably at least days ago, if not like the week prior, because I do tend to schedule my emails that are going out. I don't just like write them the day of. And I remember getting some criticism from a fellow RD about how I should have, read the room or something like that based on the fact that she got that email. And that's just an example of like, I literally just had that email scheduled and it was something about business. I don't even remember what the topic was, honestly, but it was something where it didn't matter that I wasn't saying anything controversial. I was just literally doing my job, like sharing stuff about the business and the stuff that I was helping my clients with. And somebody was mad about it, right? So it is something where I've realized that it doesn't really matter what you do, that people are going to be angry about it. And over the last year, it's just been something that a lot of us in the online space have really noticed. And it's just one of these things where you're kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't, excuse my language. But really, it's one of these things where I just kind of didn't really want to deal with it anymore. I didn't really want to deal with stirring the pot in such a volatile time. And so the last year and a half, I've kind of backed away from sharing so much controversial stuff or looking to ruffle feathers too hard. I still ruffle feathers. I just try to make it more focused on things that are more relevant to the business that I'm running and not so much a commentary on society or something like that. But the fact is that even if you're getting haters just from sharing stuff that you think is helpful for people, which honestly, I feel like pretty much most of the time I was sharing stuff to be helpful. I'm sure there was a couple of times here and there that I was just like, mad about something and felt like there was some injustice in the world or something that people were talking about that really rubbed me the wrong way that I wanted to share my opinion on. But 9 times out of 10 or more, I was sharing something to be helpful and I still got haters. And my perspective is that getting haters is actually a sign that my work is making a bigger impact on the world. Because I forget who this quote is from, but it really is totally true that the only way to avoid getting haters is to say nothing, to do nothing, and to be nothing. And that way, no one ever notices you, and the haters aren't going to find you because you're literally not saying anything. Now, I've always been willing to put myself in the way of criticism and the people who want to tell me how awful they think I am, because I do find that for every one of those angry critics that I get, there have been dozens of more people who are truly getting value from the work that I do. And that is why I do try to focus on really helpful content and not just saying stuff to stir the pot. Even if I am stirring the pot, it's because I think that there is some kind of problem that is harming people that I want to speak out about. And that's why I'm not worried about getting haters, because I know that for every hater, there's at least one other person, if not dozens more, that are getting value, that are having their lives changed by my willingness to speak out. And that's what matters to me. And truly, the more you get used to people criticizing you, the more you realize that it's honestly meaningless and it only holds the power that you give it. There's a really interesting content creator on Instagram whose name is Africa Brooke, who one of my friends alerted me to in the last couple of months. She creates super controversial content, but I really like how she approaches it, and I really like her critical thinking skills. And one of the things she said recently that I really love is that she wants to live like she's already been canceled. And it's funny because she does a lot of commentary on that whole concept of being canceled. But I just thought that that's such an interesting way to talk about it because, first of all, that's like a new phenomenon that we even have to worry about, quote unquote, getting canceled if you say the wrong thing. But I do agree with her that it is so freeing when you decide that you're not going to let others' criticism and even hate towards you change who you are or how you live your life. And I hope that we can all take a piece out of that book, so that way we're not living our lives in fear of criticism every day, especially if we're someone who's called to create, whether that's content or art or whatever you feel like you're called to create. Not letting yourself stop because of criticism or the fear of criticism is something that makes such a huge impact on your life. So I've been through it all, and I'm sure there's more coming in the future, but I just know that I'm not willing to stand down and I'm not willing to stop sharing what I believe is truth, because there's people that are going to be angry that I didn't say it the right way or didn't say it at the right time or whatever, because honestly, after 10 years, I've pretty much heard it all. Now, I'm going to kind of take a little left turn here and talk about my lesson number 4 that I've learned from 10 years of content creation. And this one came up because I was doing a free training series for nutrition entrepreneurs in August. And on that training, a lot of people asked about how they could have a financially successful nutrition business and still serve low-income people. And that is why my 4th lesson is that free content is a great way to serve those who can't afford your services. Because honestly, that is my favorite way to both have a profitable, financially successful business and to help people that maybe can't afford or don't want to pay for my services. Now, creating free content is definitely a marketing strategy. So it's not just, for the sake of giving out free stuff. That's not the only reason why you would be doing content. But it can actually make a huge difference for people who truly can't afford to pay to work with you. I've actually even had people message me before saying that by listening to my podcast or by reading my blog, that they were able to heal their hormones, get their period back. And some of them even mentioned that they were able to get pregnant successfully just from listening to my podcast or reading my blog. And they never had to pay me $1 to be able to do that, which I think is so cool. And that's why I love creating free content and will continue to do so for as long as I can, because I do care that people have access to information and education. And being able to share this stuff on a platform like this podcast or on my website for free is something that is a value of mine. It's a priority of mine. Now, if you're sharing free content, that doesn't mean that your free content has to totally cannibalize your paid stuff. This is something that I think scares a lot of nutritionists out of sharing high quality free content because they're worried that if their free content's really good, then why would anyone pay them for their actual paid services? And I just want to dispel that myth right now, because the fact is that we're in a time of the world, the golden age of information, as some people say, as some people call it, where I'm pretty sure 99.9% of everything that you could want to learn is available for free somewhere. Usually on the internet somewhere, but even if you went to the library and borrowed a book or something, like there is really no way that anyone would be stopped from seeing information that they needed to see to change their life. That goes for nutrition, that goes for business. There's so many things that you can get for free nowadays, information-wise. And that's really created the situation where information is no longer what we're selling. This used to be, a couple decades ago, you had to go to an expert to learn something because they were the ones that knew, and there was really no way for them to share it unless you paid to work with them. But nowadays with the internet, you could just pop up YouTube and watch a tutorial video on how to do something, and you can get the same result as if you had paid somebody to learn that same thing. So I know this can sound a little scary if you're somebody that wants to sell your knowledge and your experience and your wisdom and all the great stuff that you have to share with people. But the fact is that the value that comes from a paid experience very often has more to do with your ability to curate the right information and the right education in a way that makes it as easy as possible for someone to get results. And I've mentioned this before, but I'll say it again, and I'll probably say it many, many more times. And that is that many people actually have to pay for something for them to take it seriously and commit to it and to actually do the thing that they need to do to get the results. And that's why the phrase is that the transformation begins with a transaction. That payment is actually the first step to that person being able to experience a transformation because they're putting their commitment in the form of money. And I've definitely experienced this before. I've been given coaching programs. Like I have a friend in my mastermind that I'm in who has literally given me one of her, I think it was like a $5,000 program. And I hate to admit this, hopefully she's not listening, but I literally haven't even cracked it open yet because I have so much other paid stuff that I'm doing that I have put higher on my priorities list. Now that doesn't mean it's like, I'm not saying that I might never open that or learn from it. I certainly very much appreciate her sharing it with me, but it's just a great example of a situation where when I got something for free, I didn't value it as much and I haven't even looked at it. Whereas the stuff that I've paid for, even if I paid less than what that program is worth, I've put my energy and my commitment into that investment and I am showing up and learning from the thing that I paid for. So there's so many people out there that really do need to pay to talk to an expert, to get a plan, to really put the pieces in place in the order that they need to be put in. And they need to actually make that investment in order to take those steps and to commit to those steps. So you're not selling the information that's available for free online. You're charging for your ability to create a plan for somebody and to help walk them through that plan and for them to take it seriously and make that commitment. And that's why you're able to charge premium pricing for your programs and your services, whether it's one-on-one or a group or something in between, and really allow you to reach your financial goals while still creating incredible free content for those who can't or won't invest in your services. That's my favorite way to help people. I mean, beyond just using the money that I earn to donate to charities or to, support causes that I believe in, creating free content is my favorite way to spread the love and to really be able to help people that maybe can't afford my services. So you can do the same thing, and it's a great way to really help more people. And having a premium price service is what allows you to create that content because you're not working 50 hours a week serving one-on-one clients without any time to create anything for free. Okay, so lesson number 5 that I've learned from 10 years of content creation is that a little preparation goes a long way. And it's kind of funny. This is a little meta because I'm literally reading my notes from what I prepared for this podcast. Now, I'm not like reading it verbatim. I don't have a script that I'm following, but I do have notes that I put together for this episode because I wanted to make sure that I was staying on track, that I knew what I wanted to share and how I wanted to share it, and that I wasn't just rambling on, which is something that I definitely have a tendency to do, especially if I don't have any sort of pre-prepared notes or something like that I can work from. So if you're somebody who wants to create good content, I would recommend, if you're anything like me and you need a little bit of guardrails on when you're sharing, that spending some time planning your content in advance, especially for something like a podcast or a live video on social media, planning in advance can tremendously help you put out better content. And even with social media in general, which allows you to have a little bit more time to edit and to refine before you post it, it's better to set aside a regular block of time to create content rather than just posting on the fly when you feel like it or you feel inspired. Now, I'll be honest, I'm definitely someone who likes to save as much time as possible because for as hard as I work in my business, honestly, I'm also a little bit lazy. I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but I don't want to work all the time. I don't want to work as hard as possible. I do want to be efficient with my time and to be able to get work done quickly and not have to spend a ton of time doing things. So it does negatively affect me in the way that I don't always love preparing for things like my podcast or, doing things in advance. Not always the most fun. I'm not going to lie. But the fact is that I am also somebody who values excellence in my work. And I don't want to just put something out there haphazardly that I haven't put any thought into ahead of time. And that's why I spend time preparing when I am creating content. So even with a solo podcast, I typically am going to spend about 30 minutes to an hour putting together notes and preparing myself for what I'm going to talk about. And even with my interview episodes, my assistant and I have put together a document for each of those episodes with questions and topics to cover with each individual guest that comes on the show to make sure that that episode is as good as possible, that we're staying on track, that we're making the guest shine as best as possible. Because I've been on podcasts before where like questions were just like totally random and there was no preparation and it just was kind of a disaster, not gonna lie. So as an interviewer, I really want my guests to feel like they can shine as an expert in their area of expertise. And so that's why we spend time preparing for the interview, making sure that we have dotted our I's and crossed our T's and that we have a plan of what we're going to talk about, even if the content goes off on a tangent or something like that. Now, if you're someone who can wing it and still create really great content, that's awesome. You should do it, and that's totally fine if it works for you. I'm not hating on creating something when you're inspired and not having to prepare for it. However, for me, and maybe you're someone who feels this way too, I feel better if I put a little effort into planning before I create the content so I can make sure it's as good as it can possibly be while leaving a little room for in-the-moment inspiration and imperfection. Because let's be honest, perfection doesn't exist. I'm not aiming for perfection. I'm just aiming for excellence. And for me, excellence does take some preparation in advance. Now, when it comes to that preparation, that brings me to my sixth lesson, and that is that if it's not scheduled, it's not going to happen. This one's really big for me because I tend to wait until the very last minute to do things in my business, especially when it comes to content creation, because for whatever reason, I just don't want to do it. It's not the thing that I get super excited about. I will do it because I know the value of it, but I would much rather jump on a coaching call with a client than spend an hour planning content. So because of that, in order to be consistent with my content, I have to make space for it in my calendar. So I will literally block off an actual appointment in my calendar to work on certain things like recording a podcast, creating social media content, or preparing stuff for my free or paid trainings and workshops. Now, if you're someone who's struggling to find time to create content in your business, it's probably because you're not taking control of your calendar and actually blocking off the time you need to work on specific parts of your business, including your content strategy. For me, I have to have that time blocked off or it literally won't happen. And maybe you're the same way. Now, this is one of my simplest hacks for getting more done in my business, that whole concept of time blocking so I can avoid context switching as much as possible. I'm sure I could do a whole episode on time management for nutrition CEOs, and I'll probably do one of those at some point in the future. But time blocking is honestly one of the main ways that I get a lot done in a short amount of time. And if you want to create content consistently, you have to treat it like a regular appointment in your calendar and actually have it blocked as an appointment. It's not just something that you can squeeze in here and there. It needs to be something that's literally on your calendar and that you're actually scheduling other appointments around it. And that is something that I have found over the course of the last 10 years that if I don't do it, if I'm not blocking that time off, that my calendar will get overrun by other things, or I'll just forget to do it. It's honestly something where I literally will forget sometimes that I have to do a podcast episode, and my podcast team is listening right now. I apologize for being late a lot of the times with my submission, but it is something where I have gotten to a place where I'm like, if I don't schedule this, I literally will forget to do it. And if it weren't for my podcast team expecting the content 2 weeks in advance of when we actually publish it, I honestly think sometimes I would just not create content for a long period of time. I would just forget. So if you're like me and you need a little bit of accountability to yourself for content creation, then definitely make an appointment in your calendar for it, because that is the main way it's going to happen. Now, of course, if you're your own boss, nobody's forcing you to follow what's on your calendar. That's a whole nother conversation, but at least make the space for it in your calendar if you want to get it done and you don't want to be scrambling to try to squeeze it in between other appointments. Now, there are other ways to create more content with less time and not having to spend all your time doing content creation. And that is lesson number 7, which is to repurpose and repeat as much as possible. There's this belief in the online business space that all of the content you create has to be new and novel, and it has to be something you've never said before. And if you operate with that belief, you are going to run yourself into the ground. Not only is there no shame in repurposing content, it's actually a strategy that most, if not all, successful business owners use. Repurposing just means that you're taking content that you created once and using it in a different way. I do this all the time. So as an example, you could write a blog post that you then use to create a few social media posts, or maybe you even create a whole series covering everything that you wrote in that blog. So you're taking the blog and turning it into social media. So one piece of content into more pieces of content. You could also record video and audio for your podcast and share either the video or the audio on social media when the podcast goes live. We do a lot of videos for our podcast interviews and my solo episodes, and there's something called an audiogram, which is something we'll share if we just have the audio over an image. This is another way to repurpose. You can also take the posts you've done on social media and actually then expand them out into a blog or talk about them on a podcast. I don't do this so much because I don't do a lot of native content, like original stuff on social media, but it may be something I do in the future, especially as we create more content, that I may actually take what we've done there and talk about it on the podcast. So that's another way to repurpose. That's the opposite direction. Now, you can also upload your podcast audio to YouTube. Actually, I do that automatically with my podcast publishing tool called Libsyn. It's actually set up to automatically send the audio into a YouTube video, which obviously that's not going to actually have a video, but it is something that I can actually be building a YouTube channel automatically without having to create new content for it, which is really cool. Actually, you guys can go check it out. If you want to look on YouTube, I'm on there, and pretty much all of our Fed and Fearless podcast episodes are uploaded at this point. You can also reuse a caption that you wrote for an Instagram post and pair it with a new photo, or literally just repeat that same post with the same photo. Most of your audience won't even notice. Honestly, I have never had somebody say, "Hey, I saw that post like 3 months ago." It does not happen. And that's because the vast majority of your audience will not have seen your old stuff, especially if they're new to your page. If somebody just started following you in the last 3 months, they're not going to know that something you republished was something you posted 6 months ago because they were not around when you posted it 6 months ago. And sadly, you're also not going to reach your entire audience with every single post. I don't know what the exact stats are, but it's definitely a small percentage of your audience that's actually going to see the post you put up. So there's a pretty high likelihood that even if somebody's been following you for a while, that they didn't even see that post because they were one of the, 80 or 90% of your audience that post wasn't shown to. So that's more of a repeat as opposed to a repurpose, but you can repeat content all the time. And not only is it not bad, but it's actually a good thing because repetition helps your ideal clients learn better and helps them understand what you're teaching on a deeper level. How many of us need to hear something more than once before we really get it? I know that I will literally hear things over and over, and then randomly it'll just click one day. So that's why I recommend repeating and repurposing as much content as humanly possible. So that way you can keep putting content out there, keep sharing stuff that's valuable, but you don't have to keep coming up with brand new stuff all the time. You can take a lot of the stress out of content creation and can make it way easier for you to share what you want to share with your ideal audience and not feel like you have to keep reinventing the wheel. Now, another trick for simplifying content creation is tip number 8, and that is that knowing your audience well makes it way easier to create content. One thing I've noticed after niching down even more narrowly over the last year and a half is that it is so much easier to create content when you know exactly who you're speaking to and exactly what problem you're going to solve for them. I used to have a super broad niche. Niche is a strong word here, covering a huge variety of topics. And honestly, we still have a ton of variety of content on my website. If you go check out my blog, there's stuff on hormone health, gut health, all sorts of things. And that's because for many years, my main focus was helping people overcome a variety of different health challenges using a real food ancestral diet. And that made it really hard to know who I was talking to, even with the fact that I was working with a ton of clients. I had tons of things that I could talk about, but I just didn't know what I should be talking about because I didn't have that specific audience. Over time, and really in the last year and a half, even more so, the more narrow that I've gotten with my audience, the more I've gotten to know them and what their challenges are, what their goals are, what their struggles are, their pain points, their desires, the things that they want, the things that they're facing that are obstacles. All of that stuff, the more I really get intimately knowledgeable about my ideal clients, the easier it is to create content quickly. Because I can just think about literally actual clients that I work with who are on my mind that I want to reach out to people like them. I want to help people like them. And I actually have that person in mind when creating specific content. And this is honestly one of the biggest reasons I teach niching to my business coaching clients and even to pretty much anyone who wants to learn, because I do have a niche masterclass that people can purchase at any time. If you go to lauraschoenfeld.com/niche, you can get into that workshop right away. But the reason I teach niching is because it really does make such a big difference in how simplified and streamlined all of your business operations can be. And that definitely applies to content creation. So if you're someone who is finding yourself having no idea what to talk about or to write about or to post about for your business, it could be because you either don't have a niche at all or because you don't know your niche that well. And it's hard to get to know your niche well if it's vague and kind of like wishy-washy. So that has made a huge difference for me to be able to create content consistently, is knowing who I'm talking to, what problem I want to solve with not only my paid programs, but also with the content. And that just gives me way more clarity on the kind of content I should be sharing, whether that is podcast content, any sort of paid training content, free training content, social media content, all the places that I'm creating content. I know what my ideal client needs to be successful. And that's because I know them. I know them well. I've really gotten to know them on a much deeper level over the last year and a half. I've been my ideal client in the past. So, personal experience there definitely helps, but it is something that makes creating content a lot easier. Okay, so I'm going to take another hard turn here. Sometimes I have tips that kind of align with each other, and then sometimes they're just totally random. Although I will say this one definitely aligns with tip number 3. But another lesson that I have absolutely learned over 10 years of content creation is that we need to create boundaries that are suitable to us. I spoke earlier about being okay with having haters as your content starts to get noticed more regularly and by more people, and that having those haters is actually a sign that you're making an impact. However, that doesn't mean that you have to share everything with everyone or have no boundaries with your audience whatsoever. Especially over the past year, it's been really crazy how intense everyone has been trying to pressure each other to share certain things. And even before 2020, there's been so many online influencers who get way more attention for their stuff because they share so much of themselves. Sometimes literally people are sharing naked photos of themselves or like photos in their underwear. And I'm not knocking on that. I honestly do not care if somebody wants to share that kind of stuff on their own page. That is totally fine. I'm not offended by it. I may not follow somebody who shares a lot of that, but I'm not somebody who's like, you shouldn't be sharing those photos. I could care less. However, I do think sometimes when we see other people doing that, it's really, really tempting to feel like we have to do that kind of thing too in order to get noticed. And I hope that you guys can see from, my example that is absolutely not necessary for you to have an audience and for you to have a successful business. Now, personally, I like to keep a few things close to the chest, especially when it comes to my personal life, because in my perspective, people do not have to know everything about me for me to be able to help them. There's a lot of stuff that I do in my day-to-day life that I believe that, is important to me. There's relationships that I have. There's different things that happen in my life that there is no need for me to share it because it has absolutely nothing to do with how I support the people that I want to work with. And on top of that, I do not want to create a business that revolves around me and my personal life for a variety of reasons, not least of all that I've seen other people that have a business set up like that, where they start to share stuff and people just, freak out about them. Like if somebody has shared all about their marriage and suddenly their marriage is on the rocks or they're going through a divorce and their audience just blows up at them. Now, obviously, I hope that never happens to me. I have a great marriage. I love my husband, but I don't want my business to be based off of people's interpretation of my marriage. Or if we have kids, I don't want my kids to be something that is why people follow me and they want to learn about my kids. Like I do not want to have a business where my personal life is what people are following me for. Now, I'll sprinkle some of it in here and there. And, I'm happy to share a little bit about stuff because I do want you guys to get to know me. I do want to be approachable. I want you to feel like I'm somebody that you can relate to, but I do not need to share everything for that to happen. And you do not have to share everything with your audience to have that connection as well. So as I mentioned before, I've put out a lot of controversial content that's attracted criticism. And, I've been willing to stand up for my beliefs and to ruffle feathers and all of that. But on the other hand, I've also been pretty firm with certain boundaries. And even in the last 10 years, have chosen not to share a lot of super personal details about myself publicly. And, part of that is for my own mental well-being and, the way I want to live my life. But I do think another part of that is because I want to show people that it's possible to have a successful business especially a personal brand business that doesn't require you to bare your soul and just like be, a totally open book about every single little thing and be just like completely vulnerable all the time. And I really want to encourage you guys that you guys get to choose the boundaries that work for you. And you don't have to feel pressured into sharing anything more than you're comfortable with just because vulnerability is trending. And if you want to share that stuff, great. Like I said before, I'm not knocking it. I'm not poo-pooing it. People can do whatever they want. I'm definitely more of a libertarian about a lot of things, but I just don't want to do it. And I know for a fact that it has really not negatively affected my business. And honestly, I feel a lot better creating a business that is not wrapped up around me and my personality and my personal life as being the reason why people want to listen to me. I want my knowledge, my experience, my education, the things that I share to help you guys improve your life, whether that's in your health, your business, whatever. I want that to be what inspires you and not like, photos of me and my family and, sharing things that have happened to me that really have nothing to do with helping you live a more fearless life. Okay. So I know that one can be a little nerve-wracking for people. So just know that you do not have to post photos of yourself in your underwear to grow a following. Hopefully a few of you are having a big sigh of relief about that, but it is something that I know can feel a little hard to navigate with our current world. But just know that I think it's actually better to build a business that does not revolve around you. So hopefully that can be helpful. All right, so we're up to lesson number 10. And this is something that I really learned from working with Chris Kresser, just being able to help him create programs for not only the general public, but also for his practitioner training program and his health coaches and all of that. So I've kind of run the gamut of creating content for people at all different levels of education. And no matter who I was talking to, this one tip here or this one lesson always applied. And that is to keep it simple, sweetie. I like to say that. That's from my friend Brandy from my mastermind, that KISS. There's other ways you can spell that out, but I like the keep it simple, sweetie. So my final tip and my final lesson of the last 10 years of creating great content is that it's best to keep things as simple as possible. One of my skills that has gotten me to where I am today is my ability to take complicated information and distill it down into simple and action-oriented content. And ever since I started my blog in 2011, I always wanted to create health content on my blog and eventually on my podcast that was really easy for the general public, not only to understand, but also to take action on. And now as I've pivoted to business coaching, even in my business coaching content, I'm always looking for ways to simplify things to make it even easier for my clients to understand. And it's not because my clients are not intelligent or anything like that. They're super smart, super savvy. A lot of them are these amazing functional medicine practitioners that a lot of them actually know more than me about nutrition at this point. But there are so many concepts that I'm teaching them that are new to them. And so that simplification, that keeping things as simple as possible and as action-oriented as possible actually helps them do the work that I want them to do and to take action and to actually get the results. And that'll be the same thing for you and your audience, no matter what you're helping people do. The more simple you can make your content, the more effective it'll be, not only for attracting your audience, but also for supporting your clients in their ability to get the results you want to help them get. And if you're a dietitian like me, and if you have a master's degree like me, you know that it's tempting to write stuff at a really high level. We got trained to write these like super academic papers in undergrad and grad school in order to get a better grade. And I think honestly, that style of writing has kind of made it hard for us to connect with our audience as well as we could. When you're writing content or you're creating stuff for your business to help your ideal clients solve a problem, especially in nutrition, just remember that you're not writing a paper for grad school. You're writing a blog post. You're writing a social media caption. So do your best to keep the reading level below 8th grade level and really think about how you can use language effectively to make things easier to understand. Things like stories, metaphors, and short sentences can make your stuff a lot more easy to consume. And in many cases, it's easier to write that way as well. I do a lot of editing and content support for my clients and helping them go over their copy on their websites and all of these different places, sales pages, opt-in pages, lots of different places. And I think the main thing I do is help people simplify stuff, because so many times they're, using all this flowery language, they're writing run-on sentences, they're trying to put a lot of content on the page. And 90% of the time, what I'm doing is actually taking stuff out to make it more simple. And if you can do that effectively, it's going to work so well for you when it comes to not only attracting people to your business, but also when you actually want to educate people. The simpler, the better. And when you're creating content, I know it can feel really tempting to make it this like super intelligent sounding, like highly referenced research type of paper, but I don't think it's actually helpful for your audience if it's written at a level that is too academic. And if you just want to write something off the cuff, if you just want to share something from experience or from the heart, don't put pressure on yourself to have like 100 different references and write in super formal language so that you come across as well educated, which I do think a lot of us, we experience imposter syndrome. We want people to take us seriously. And that's what triggers us into writing this way, even though it's not effective and it's not as valuable. And it's way more valuable for your audience if you focus on writing in a way that they can understand and can connect emotionally and intellectually with, and not feel like they have to like get a second degree in college to be able to understand what you're writing. So I definitely recommend that you make it easier, not only for yourself, but also for your audience, and try to keep your content as simple as possible. The simpler it is, the more it's going to land with people, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to put out if you don't have this super complicated like essay that you're writing that you're, pretending like you're writing for a college professor. I promise it does not have to be like that. And even if you're worried that it's coming across as unprofessional, I don't really care if other professionals think my stuff is unprofessional. I want my clients to feel like it's something that they can apply to their own life. And I'm not worried about what people that are, in my field or, doctors or anyone who's quote unquote educated in health or nutrition. It's not for them. It's for the people that I want to serve. And the people that I want to serve are generally not super educated in nutrition. In general, not always the case. Sometimes they're very educated. I've worked with a lot of dietitians and nutritionists on their health and obviously on their business as well. And even if somebody's highly educated, that doesn't mean they need something to be written at a super academic level in order to get value from it. All right. Well, that was my 10 lessons from 10 years being online. And I know that I will continue to learn more as time goes on. I'm always learning and I'm always trying to improve everything that I do in my business. I know even with this podcast, it's something that I want to continue improving and continue to make more valuable for my listeners. So like I said, now that I have signed up to work with a voice coach, hopefully you guys will see some improvement there, because I always want everything to be as great as it possibly can be, while also remembering that I'm always going to be a work in progress. And it's more important that I get the stuff out to you than I get it perfect. So I hope that this has been inspiring to you. Thank you for being a part of my audience. If you've already listened to all 100 episodes of this podcast, I am so impressed. And if this is the first podcast of mine that you've ever listened to, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. I hope that this little recap of the last 10 years of content creation has been valuable for you. DM me on Instagram. Let me know which of this resonated with you the most. I would love to hear from you what you're learning from the content that I'm putting out. All right. Well, I hope you guys have a great week. Thanks for hanging out with me for the last hour, and I will see you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Are you a nutritionist or dietitian struggling to figure out how much to charge for your programs and services? Maybe you've heard that as a nutritionist, you should just charge what you're worth. But this way of thinking can cause you to either undercharge your clients or work yourself into the ground trying to earn your worth. As a healthcare provider, you can't set up a pricing structure that forces you to sacrifice your own health and well-being in the name of your business and your clients. But I promise it doesn't have to be this way. When you download my free profit planning workbook, I'll walk you step by step through the 10-step process for determining the right pricing for your nutrition business. As a nutritionist, you have the power to completely change someone's life for the better. There's huge value in that, so it's time to stop underselling what you do. By following along with this worksheet, you can determine exactly what you need to charge to achieve your revenue goals with ease. I'll teach you everything I've learned about pricing from growing my own nutrition business to over $250,000 in revenue annually and helping other dietitian and nutrition entrepreneurs hit their first $10,000 to $30,000 months and beyond. To get your free workbook, go to lauraschoenfeld.com/profit, PROFIT, and grab your copy today, so you no longer have to wonder how to set the right rates for your incredibly valuable nutrition services. That's lauraschoenfeld.com/profit. It's time to make the money that you deserve as a nutritionist, and I can't wait to help you get there.